Welcome back, everyone. So today we're going to talk about the two cars that I owned but did not register. But before we do that, I've been kind of looking this car over to see what I want to get done to it this year. When springtime hits and I can finally start driving it again. So I was originally planning on doing new shocks all around, and I just felt that it handled a bit smooth, a little bit soft. The suspension was a little soft, not really floaty, but just a bit soft. And in doing some quick driveway tests, I've come to determine that the shocks are actually not in bad shape. What you can do with a car, if you suspect suspension issues or shock or strut issues, you pick the car up and you let it drop down. And if it comes crashing down and you've got shocks, well, guess what? Your shocks are toast. But it doesn't do that. It comes down not instantly, but smoothly. It doesn't come just... The other thing is it doesn't bounce. So when you pick up the car and you drop it, it should come down and up and stay. And that's exactly what it does. So I think I'm going to let it go for a little bit longer. And maybe another year or two, and then I'll do the shocks. And this car uses coilovers, so the shocks and springs come out as one unit. And I'm probably going to do shock mounts, whether it needs it or not. I don't want to put the old ones back on. Those are the rubber. They're rubber bonded to a steel plate, and that's what absorbs the vibration from the shock rod. So yeah, I was going to do shocks, but I think I'm going to wait. And when I do them, I'm not putting sport suspension parts in it. I'm putting in exactly what came out. So I've chosen the KYB, I believe, G series shocks. And those are equivalent to the OEM shocks. But it's amazing to me how long they've lasted. 26 years is a long time for suspension parts. So any rubber parts that come out are getting replaced. I'm probably going to do ball joints up front just to do them. Probably ball joints and tie rod ends, and then I'm going to have it aligned. Just get it all done. And that way I don't have to worry about it anymore. But one of the things two things I'm going to do to this car this year. I'm going to have it properly detailed. There are a couple of shops in my area that do paint correction. There are two really good ones. Well, one that I know is good, and another one I've never heard much of. But we'll give them a try. See what they can do for me. But this car is World Mark City. You can really see it. I can see it. Maybe you can't, but right here. A lot of fine scratches, which are typical of improper waxing procedures. It was like that when I bought it, and I tried to maintain it, and I failed. So I'm going to just have it done right, and then I'm going to maybe rethink the process that I use for detailing and cleaning the car. I've never brought this through an automatic car wash. I've washed it in a pay and spray wash with the brush. But I wash the brush first, and then I clean the car. And I don't think that was a good idea. I think those brushes, no matter what you do to them, they're never going to be clean. I spray them really well before they come close to my car. But anyway, in getting the car prepared for that, I've actually started pulling off some stuff. So this is you can see the trunk lid. Had a luggage rack on it, and there it is. This is the OEM luggage rack. These are actually pretty coveted to certain Miata enthusiasts. Not everybody. This is not everybody's bag. This is more of a, if it's your thing, it's your thing. If it's not, it's not. I like the luggage racks because they make it look like a touring car. It gives it that touring car look, and that's what I loved so much about the car. So it's going back on. I mean, it would kind of have to, because I'm not going to fill in all these holes and have the trunk lid repainted. If I were to delete the rack, I would just buy a new trunk lid. It's not that big a deal. And then just buy a new trunk lid and have it painted to match. But funnily enough, that ship has sailed for this car. This trunk lid has been replaced. It was in a very, very minor collision, and I just had all this carpeting out, and I've looked around. I can't find any evidence of any bodywork being done to the rear end of the car. None. Nothing. Other than some fresh paint. Nothing. There's nothing. I don't get it. I don't know how this car was hit, but the damage is so minimal. But this trunk lid has been replaced. It has a Mazda RDOT. That is a factory replacement part, and it has no VIN tags on it. So it's a factory trunk lid that was put on, strangely enough, and the bumper has been replaced too. So and then that was freshly painted. But anyway, yeah. So when they had done the trunk lid replacement, they could have just left the factory roof rack or the trunk lid mounted whatchamajigger off, but they didn't. They took the time and effort and drilled holes into a brand new trunk lid. So I'm just going to keep that there, and I'm okay with that. I haven't tried cleaning this off because it's too cold, and none of the stuff I use to clean this car will work in such cold temperatures. You can see the paint has been worn through in some spots, but that's alright. I'm going to get some touch-up paint before this goes back on. After the car gets buffed in the springtime, I'm going to get some touch-up paint, and I'm going to touch up what I can. I'm going to put some new sealer around the holes, and it'll be like new again. I bought a battery maintainer because that is the responsible thing to do. I didn't do this last year because I didn't really have electricity in the garage. But this year I have plenty of power. I've upgraded the electrical in the garage. So I bought a maintainer and charger. This is the more powerful one. This will charge a dead battery. Word of caution though, if you're storing a car, a motorcycle, whatever it is, you don't want that battery going flat. You don't want to run the risk of that battery going completely flat, because if you do, and you live in a climate like New England where things freeze, your electrolyte will freeze. Due to a chemical reaction and physics and stuff I don't understand, automotive lead-acid batteries, which contain a liquid electrolyte, they do not freeze unless it's like 70 below zero Fahrenheit. Because of a chemical reaction, something to do with the electrons and the ions, and they're doing their shit, and they just don't want to freeze when the battery has a charge in it. But when the battery goes dead, to where it won't even light up the dashboard, it will freeze. And when that happens, you run the risk of the battery casing expanding and cracking. It's just not good. So, because this is a fairly new battery, I bought it last year, I put a maintainer on it, and it will never go dead. And I've heard batteries in Miatas lasting for 8 years or more, so here's to a long life. Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about the 2 cars that I owned but did not register. So, let's It's cold. Welcome back to all the cars I've owned, the bonus episode. 2 cars that I owned but never registered. So, starting with the first one. When I got my 87 Volkswagen GTI, I was around 15 years old, or I had just turned 16. And it was my first car. It was the first time I'd ever worked on a vehicle, period. And I wasn't really good at setting priorities. So I didn't know where to start with this car. It started up and ran, but it had lifter noise. It had nasty lifter noise. And it had an exhaust leak, so I was going to pull the motor apart and replace stuff I didn't need to replace. That's, when you don't know what you're doing, you're a hammer and everything is a nail. So, but it also had rear brake issues. The rear brakes were seized up. So I started out, I got a job, I started making a little bit of money, and I went to the local, there's a company that does only foreign car parts, and it was called Northern Foreign Car Parts out in Nashua, New Hampshire. They're still in business, and they still do their thing, and they do it well. But I bought 2 rebuilt rear calipers with pads for this car, and they set me back. Oh my God, those were expensive. A couple $100 a piece. I had the GTI, which had a rear disc. The Golfs did not have rear disc. I think the Golf GT did, but generally Golfs did not have rear disc back then. But the GTI did, and the Jetta GLI as well. So I figured, okay, well, so I started putting money into this car, and after a couple of months, a month or two, my dad came home from work and said, hey, this guy at work's got a 1990 Golf, 2-door, and he wants to sell it, $200. You want it? And at the time, I think that's all I had to my name. I had $200 to my name. And I said, well, let's take a look at it. So my initial thought was, I can take this car and use it for parts. Oh, that was a dumb decision, because as you learn, this car wasn't a parts car. This could have been a daily driver, but I was stupid. I wanted the GTI to run, and because it said GTI on the back, and it was cool, and it was nice. Dumb decision, dumb kid. No, I was just a normal 16-year-old with hopes and dreams of a little hot hatch racer, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so we drove out to, this guy lived out in the boonies, and we saw the car. It was a dark blue Golf, 2-door. I think the trim level was like GL. It was a base trim level for the Golf. It had factory AC, power steering, and that was about it. It didn't have any power options. This was back when most people didn't buy cars. Like, when you bought a new car, you could buy, I believe most trim levels had manual windows and manual locks and all that stuff. This was a pretty standard vehicle for its time. Pretty normal. It was a 5-speed manual, of course, as most Volkswagens were back then. But unlike the GTI, so it was a little bit newer than the GTI. So it had the Digifont fuel injection system, which is a little bit better than the K-Jetronic that my Golf had, my GTI had. Same engine, the 8-valve motor. The interior was a little bit lower market, where my Golf GTI had, nice bolstered GTI seats. This one had just the standard cloth interior that you would get in a Jetta or Golf of its time. The instrument cluster didn't have a tachometer, so we're talking, just your run-of-the-mill Golf. Rear drum brakes, it was nothing special. Had 160,000 miles on it, and after jumping the car, it started and it ran. The engine sounded pretty good in it, actually. It didn't sound bad at all. Body was in overall good condition. The paint it wasn't scratch free, but it was in really good condition. The paint was nice and shiny. It was a nice blue color. Had a good overall, demeanor. I mean, the car, you could have put plates on it and driven it, with one exception. The rear drum brakes were frozen solid. So I said, you know what? I'll buy the car and I'll use it for parts, because I'm a dumb kid, and dumb kids do dumb things. My plan was, I'm looking at the car not as something I could put plates on and drive, but as something that I could take parts off of. It had a nice hood. It had the fenders were good, the hood was great. It had a lot of things that I could have used in the GTI getting it back on the road again. I don't recall exactly what I took, but I took quite a few parts off of it. when I ended up starting to work on the cars. So I bought the car. We towed it home. Now, way back in the day, in the 70s, U-Haul would rent you a tow hitch for your car. Now, what it was like an A-frame with a ball mount on the end that you would strap to the nose of your car with chains. Back when cars had heavy, thick steel frame-mounted bumpers that could take some weight. And you would just clamp it to your bumper and you would tow it. You would flat tow your car with this thing. And the problem, my father got one because U-Haul had gotten rid of all of these things at one point, and my dad ended up getting one as part of a deal. I don't know how he got it, but he got one. And we proceeded to strap it to the front of the Golf, and it ruined the bumper. I mean, ruined it. Because it wasn't meant for modern plastic, 5-mile-an-hour impact bumpers. That's not what it was made for. So anywho, we got the car home, barely. I mean, this thing was falling off the car by the time we pulled into the driveway. So I started, it's looking back as an adult, looking back on my 16-year-old self, I would have said, listen, you dumbass, fix the brakes on the Golf. Scrap the GTI. Take the wheels off the GTI, put them on the Golf because it had those cool snowflake wheels on it. A full, perfect set of snowflakes. These wheels are worth money now, by the way. So I should have taken the wheels off the GTI, put them on the Golf. Maybe taken some of the interior bits, the nicer parts of the GTI, like the leather shift knob or shifter boot that it had, and put that on the Golf. And maybe even, that's what I should have done. That's not what I did. I took this perfectly good 1990 Golf, pulled the fenders off. I pulled the hood because my GTI had a smashed fender. So I took one of the fenders, I took the hood, I took, what else did I grab? I took the starter, I took a couple of clips, and those little clips and attachment fasteners and stuff that you always lose. I took a bunch of those off of it. I took one wheel, because I wanted a full-size spare for some reason. Didn't even fit in the damn tire well, but we won't even go there. I grabbed just a couple of random parts off of it. I mean, I got $200 worth of parts off this car, no question. But thinking back, I could have fixed that Golf for far less money and far quicker. I could have been on the road a year and a half sooner had I just put the money in the Golf. But no. I looked at it this way. I already bought these calipers for the GTI. I'm not going to waste that money. Duh. Idiot. Should have kept the Golf. It had a more reliable fuel injection system. It had a couple of oil leaks. The reason the car was being sold so cheaply is it had a bunch of oil leaks that I could have fixed easily. The windshield was leaking because, in true Yankee cheapness, the guy who owned the car that I bought it from, his son, rather than calling up a windshield shop to have the windshield replaced, he got one from a junkyard. And it never got put in right. It was never sealed correctly because they don't... Windshield shops use heated sealer guns and heated sealers that cure really nice. Yankees use RTV or whatever they can get at the hardware store, and it always leaks. It always comes loose. Anyway, should have just taken the windshield out and called the windshield repair shop to come over and fix it. But no. No, I had to put all my effort, money, and time into a freaking GTI that was a rotted piece of crap. This Golf had no rust. No rust. Anywhere. Not even the rust that was hidden in the GTI. I looked in those places and knocked it with a hammer. Solid undercarriage. Solid suspension. I'm getting mad at myself right now for doing this. The poor car. It was so the interesting thing about it though. It was built in the Westmoreland, Pennsylvania factory, and just like my GTI was. Now that factory had shut down in 1988, I believe. That was their last year of operation. But strangely enough, this particular car had a manufacturing date of like mid to late 1988, but it was sold as a 1990. When I looked at the registration for the car, the previous registration, because in New Hampshire, when you on title exempt vehicles in New Hampshire, all you need is a bill of sale, handwritten on a napkin, and a previous reg, and you can register the car in your name. That's all you need. And that's why there's so much fraud going on in New Hampshire for used cars, or there was in the past. Nowadays, anything after 2000 requires a title, but another story for another video. So, I could have put this damn thing on the road, put rear brakes on it, and I could have driven it. But no. I basically stripped it, and I ended up scrapping the car. Oh yeah, what was I saying? Oh, the title. It was a 1990 model year, manufactured in 1988. I believe the car was basically one of the last runs off the Pennsylvania production line. That is my belief. So it was probably put together with leftover parts. I mean, it's possible that it could have been hung up and maybe it was waiting for something and they put it on hold, or it was defective, so they put it aside. And by the time it got ready to sell it, they just built it as a 1990. Who knows? I mean, who knows, right? So that poor car ended up, my neighbor wanted it. So I had a neighbor, he was about a year or two younger than me, and he wanted the car. So I'm like, well, I'm stripping it for parts, but you're welcome to it. By this point, it was still a perfectly good, clean titled body, chassis, and engine. And it was it could have been made to run and drive again very easily. But he took the car, parked it beside his dad's garage, and beat the crap out of it with golf clubs. Broke the windows out of it, put dents all over the damn thing. It was so sad. That car could have lived, but it didn't. My GTI should have never been put back on the road. This would have been the perfect car for me. It would have been cheaper to insure. Nope. I'm a stubborn kid. And my father he likes to let me do, when I was growing up, he tried to let me make my own mistakes. And, and it was a good thing he did that, because I learned a lot in the process. But this would have been one of those things where I could have saved a lot of money by fixing up this little blue Golf. Anyway, sore subject. So that was the first car. I owned it for about a summer, maybe. Not even. I think I had it for like 2 or 3 months, and then it was gone. The other car I had, some of you guys have asked about this car in my in the comments, and I'm going to talk about it. My father dragged home a car from one of his other coworkers just a couple years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago. It was a 1997 Saturn SC1. This was Saturn's Sport Coupe. And he dragged it home because his coworker was going to scrap it, and he couldn't let it happen. My dad, he can't let a car go to the scrapyard if it has life in it. So things still ran and drove, and it was a free car. So my dad, he saw it like a lost puppy, and he brought it home. And when I went to visit my parents one day, I saw this purple Saturn SC1 sitting in the driveway, and my first reaction was, oh, it probably belongs to the guy across the street who runs the body shop, and my dad makes keys for him for a lot of his cars that he buys at the auctions. So my dad was a locksmith for many years. Anyway, so this poor little purple SC1, I'm thinking, oh, I must be making a key for it or something. So I asked my dad, like, what's with the Saturn? And he said, "Oh yeah, that's mine now." I'm like, "What? Why? What happened? Are you all right? Why did you agree to take a purple SC1? I mean, did he owe you money? I mean, what the hell?" So he told me about the car. It was the guy he works with, one of the guys he works with. He bought the car brand new. Him and his wife bought it new. We later found out he leased it and then bought it from the leasing company. But it was a one-owner car, 160,000 miles or so. And it was just, it was time to let it go, and he bought his wife a new car, and this was just in the way. He couldn't sell it. They wouldn't take it in as a trade, so he was going to scrap it. It started up and ran. It drove. It had an automatic transmission, had a sunroof, power windows. It was a nice car in its day. It really was. For a 97, power sunroof, power windows, power mirrors, locks. It had a cassette, AM/FM cassette deck, factory still in it. It had keyless entry. I believe it had keyless entry in it. So you press a remote, unlocks. That was a big deal. It had the standard Saturn, I think it was a 1.9 liter, 16 valve, 4-cylinder engine. Air conditioning. It was a pretty well equipped car for its time. And being a Saturn, though, is it has all the plastic body panels. So on a Saturn, you've got plastic door panels, plastic quarter panels, fenders. The roof panel is plastic. I believe it's plastic. It could be metal. I don't remember. Anyway, but all the lower panels were plastic, and they did that for two reasons. It's dent resistant, and it doesn't rust. So a 20-some-year-old car with no rust on it, visible anyway, it's a big deal. No rust. Oh, the rocker panels, I believe. So the way they designed it, there were no rocker panels per se. More like you could see part of the space frame that the car was constructed from, that all the panels hung off of. It did have rocker panel covers, I believe. But that all being said, I looked the car over. It had no rust. I mean, it was a solid car. And I asked my dad, I'm like, there's this project I've been wanting to do for many years. I've always wanted to take a junk car and put grass on it. Just cover it in grass. I just think it would be hilarious. I think it would be cool. It would be something that you could show off at a car show or something. And my dad agreed. So he gave me the car. He said, I wasn't going to do anything with it. It's yours. Cool. So he signed it over to me. He had the title and everything. Title and bill of sale, whatever. So I was now the proud owner of a 97 SC1, purple. And so I immediately started looking at, okay, what does this car need? So it burned a shit ton of oil. So I knew beforehand that Saturn 1.9 liter engines were notorious for oil consumption. And it was just a normal behavior, really. But it started up, no engine light, nothing wrong with it. But it ran a little rough, and it smoked, and what else? It leaked oil. It leaked a lot of oil. So I popped the hood. First of all, I put a battery in it. The battery was dead, so I put a new battery in the car. I ran some motor flush through it, and this stuff is like it's like the fluid of last resort. When you've got an engine that you don't care about, that leaks and burns and smokes, and this is your last chance of salvation. So I flushed the engine like 3 times. That's 3 oil changes with motor flush in it. Put fresh, high-quality oil in the engine. Started it up. Didn't smoke anymore. It had a nasty lifter tap. It was like clack, 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 clack. No more tap. It sounded like a sewing machine. Perfect. Just perfect. And it didn't smoke anymore. Sometimes what happens with these engines, because I also sea-foamed it at the same time. attack it from both ends. Sometimes your oil control rings, if the engine oil is left to sludge up for too long, occasionally you can have rings that stick and they no longer spring against the cylinder walls. And that's what happened here. The oil control rings were no longer seating against the wall, so it was just allowing oil to freaking do its damage. So I think I licked that problem. I got the engine running smoothly by replacing a few things. It had a leaky vacuum line somewhere, I forget where. The PCV valve was blocked. That's another thing. A blocked PCV valve can also increase oil consumption, so I put a new one of those in. The valve cover gasket was leaking profusely, so I put a new one on there, no big deal. I put a new alternator belt on it, fresh oil change, changed the power steering fluid, I changed a few other fluids in the car, just whatever I could do really quick for little money. Got it running great. It had good brakes, good tires, so I'm like, alright, this is the perfect car for my grass-covered car project. I started working on the interior. I ripped out the moldy back seat. There were some water leaks in the back window, so I figured I'd deal with that later. But let's get the mold out of the car. Clean the interior as best I could. And I'm getting ready to acquire some material. So I looked at a few different options. I started out by planning on covering the car with burlap. So smearing adhesive all over the car and covering it with burlap. And then having the car hydro-seeded by like True Green Chemlon or something like that. And then having it grow organically. But then I'm like, well, why don't I just... That's only going to look good for 5 minutes, and that burlap is going to fly off. Who am I kidding? So then I started looking at other options. I looked at... I went to the hardware store, to Lowe's, and they sell a... It's like an artificial turf, and you use it in small spots for like pets and stuff, and it gives them a place to lay or whatever. So I was looking at that, but that was going to cost me over $1,000, I believe, to cover the car in fake grass. And I'm like, that's not in the budget. So I looked at other options. Until I was working at, I was doing some work in our maintenance facility at work, where I work, doing work. And so I was in the maintenance facility, and I was talking to our maintenance director about what I was doing. And he said, oh yeah, we're going to be replacing our turf field in like a couple of years or so, or like I forget when they planned it out. Because the stuff is only good for 10 years. And the building was already 10 years old, so he was going to replace the entire field. And I'm like, really? I think I could get my hands on some of that stuff. And he says, I don't see why not. I mean, it's just going to get scrapped. This stuff is perfectly good. It's AstroTurf. The same. It's a ball field. I mean, it's good stuff. What they do is on a lot of newer fields, rather than waste money on watering grass that's going to die anyway, they use artificial turf, and it looks like grass, it feels like grass, it plays like grass, but it's polymer that's made to look like blades of grass that's sewn into like a substrate. And then what they do is they infill it with a special sand-like substance. It's got sand and rubber, it's a whole big thing. And they fill the whole field with this stuff, and they rake it into the grass so that it weighs down the substrate. And by the time you're done, you've got fake grass, and you can't really tell the difference. So anyway, I talked to him about that, and he says, yeah, you could probably get some of this stuff, no big deal. But it won't be for about a year or so, a year or two. So I'm like, well, okay, let me think about it. In the meantime, I've got this car sitting in my parents' yard. So I went back to the car. I was planning on registering the car to drive it, just to keep it moving. And the neighbor across the street, who has the body shop, he regularly buys and sells cars. That's how he feeds himself. He buys junk cars, he paints them, he fixes them, and he resells them for a profit. And he had his eye on this car ever since my dad got it. And now that he sees that it runs and it runs well, he kind of wanted to get his hands on it. So he comes to me and he says, "What are you doing with that car?" And I said, "Well, here's what I'm going to do to it." And he's like, "I'll make you a deal. I'll give you a generator in exchange for that car." And I'm thinking, I don't need a generator. But then a light came on in my head, and I'm like, wait a minute. My dad and my mom just bought a camper. And I remember him mentioning he wanted to get a small generator so that he can power it up, if he's camping somewhere, where there's no power. And I'm like, wait a minute. Hold that thought. Let me see the generator first. So I looked at the generator. It was an older mid-90s Honda that looked like it was in mint condition. It looks like it was never really used all that much. It's definitely used. And he said that it was owned by a gentleman who had a private plane, and that was his auxiliary power unit. He'd fire it up to charge the battery out in the tarmac, and then he'd fly and whatever. That's all it was ever used for. And so it was never used like in a power outage and it ran day and night. It was just in times when he needed to charge his plane's battery or get it started, I guess. That's all it was ever used for. And it was only used with aviation fuel. So I said, well, okay, runs great, doesn't smoke, doesn't have any issues. So I made the swap. I gave him the paperwork for the Saturn. I took the generator over to where my dad in his little workshop, and I said, "Here, Merry Christmas." And my dad's like, "You got rid of the car?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I had my fun. I got the car running again. I've done my job. And here's a generator for your camper." So we tested out the generator on the camper, and it fired up everything. The AC, the refrigerator, the lights, everything was running on this little generator, and he ended up not using it. And then by the time I bought this house, my dad brought it over along with a lawnmower and some other stuff that he wanted me to have. So generator's sitting right there. That Saturn was put back on the road, and somebody's probably driving it now. Probably not now. It's been a few years. But that's the story of the Saturn and why the project was put to a halt. It was getting expensive and time-consuming, and I just didn't have the resources to finish it. But I got the car running smoothly again, and it was saved from the junkyard. So, win-win, right? Those are the two cars that I've owned, but never registered. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope this series has been entertaining to some of you. I'm going to put my window back up. I really don't... It's so cold. Well, there you go. The windows on this car have been slow since I bought it, and I've tried to solve that problem. It's not really a problem, it's just the way they're made. I've had the motors out, I've lubricated the tracks and cables, and they just are what they are. But when it's 15 degrees outside, it's even worse. So, yeah. Alrighty. I apologize, it's blowing like mad out here. The wind is crazy. So, for many years, I wanted to build an art car. Specifically, a car covered in grass. And until now, I haven't had a decent donor car to make this possible. So I acquired this 1997 Saturn SC2. It was actually given to me by my father, who got it from a coworker. The original owner, this is a one-owner car. And it has every option, I believe, available for a 1997 Saturn SC2. And for a New England car, it's in remarkably good condition. Obviously, plastic body panels that have never rusted. All plastic, yep, all around. Which makes it an even better vehicle for what I want to do with it, because it'll never rust. I can drill holes in the body and not have to worry about any rust or anything like that. The roof, I believe the roof is steel. I think it's steel. The only thing metal on this car is the undercarriage and the sills. Now, like I said, it has every option for a 97 Saturn, including leather interior. traction control, cruise control, AM/FM cassette, AC, power, everything. Yeah, it's also got the optional sunroof, power sunroof. Unfortunately, the headliner is in really bad condition. All the cloth is torn and falling off. The sun visors are in pretty rough shape. I mean, this car has seen better days. It had a water leak for many years, so I got to peel back the carpet and take a look and see how it kind of rust situation is going on in there. I've got the keys and the title, but what I'm going to do is I want to get an evaluation, and that's kind of what this video is all about. I want to take a look at it. I haven't really worked on cars in a long time. I pretty much just buy new cars every time my old ones get more than 100,000 miles on them, which only takes me 3 or 4 years. I've been fortunate enough to not have to worry about driving clunkers. I'm one of the lucky ones. It's got a keyless entry. This one doesn't work. Battery's probably flat. Let's take a look. Starts right up. Oh boy. Hear that? So she starts up and runs. It's impressive. It's not registered. I can't take it on the road, but we can take it through the driveway here. It's misfiring a little bit, but there's no engine light yet. Oh god, this thing sounds... Hey Zach, what are you doing? It's got good brakes, good tires. Well, it needs front tires. But I also want to make this a video series on how to maintain or bring a car like this back to life again. Let's take a look under the hood. It's got a bit of a wrap. It sounds to me like it could just be lifters. So here's what I know about the car. The one owner, they never maintained it. They never really changed the oil in it. They just kept adding more oil when it ran low. Being a Saturn, it was known for oil consumption. Leaking from the valve cover gasket over here. The engine sounds, it sounds worse than it is, I think. Let's rev it up a little bit and see. Yeah, a little bit of maintenance will go a long way in this car. Let's take a look at the coolant. It's got plenty of it, but it should be flushed out. It's definitely not clean. It looks like Dex Cool mixed with green coolant. But power steering seems to work okay. I don't know if the air conditioner works, but we're going to find out. Tell me I locked myself out of it. But I want to get a good look at the undercarriage and see what that looks like. Haven't even checked the oil. It's probably low. Oil pressure is not too bad though. Transmission, my dad drove this car and he said that the transmission is pretty solid. Oh, AC compressor kicked in. Let's see how that feels. 60 degrees out, so it's not going to feel crazy cool. That engine doesn't sound too healthy, but it's not really smoking or anything. I don't see anything coming off the back. Moisture from the exhaust system. Let's take a look at the trunk here.
the other key in my pocket. Oh, that engine does not sound great. Like I said, this is going to be just a little fun little project. What do we got back here? So there's no. The body appears to be pretty solid. It's definitely leaking water. That's not good. It's probably been leaking coolant. I don't know why else it'd be a full bottle of Dex coolant here, but I used to do this stuff all the time, long before I was ever on YouTube. I would take junk cars, I'd fix them up, and you know, having a father who was an auto mechanic makes those sort of things possible. Spare tire's blown. Let's take a look inside the tire well here. Surprisingly no rust. And those lifters are clacking like son of the bitches. You can hear it from here. Got an extra oil cap. Let's take a look at that rear seat. Oh my god. They're totally rotted. These have to come out. Look at that shit. Oh my god. Those seats are gone. Look at that. Well, my concern is that there's rust on the floor. Hey, look, a Best Buy receipt. From 2008. They bought Dynasty Warrior 6. Interesting. Take a look underneath. So, the pinch seam is all there. There's no rust in that seam, which is pretty unusual for a New England car. Besides, the sill plates are plastic. Looks like it's got pretty good exhaust. I don't see any leakage or hear any. This car is freaking solid. That AC's moving. Look at the compressor, it's still going. Not bad. Truck powered. Still solid. Alright, pinch weld, pinch seam is pretty good here. Frame rails are okay. Unbelievable. This car is in better shape than I ever thought it would be. It just needs front tires to pass inspection. Get that door unlocked. Does this work? No. I'm blown away at how solid this car is. We don't usually see these things in New England like this. How much fuel is in it? Unlock. Yeah, power locks aren't really working. And that door, I think, is something wrong with it. We'll fix that. Stereo work? Some stereo works. Power sunroof? Not for long. It's binding up. Alright. I should get that lubricated before I use it. Ooh. That's not good. Let me get some dry lube in there.